welcome back to Keys of the Kingdom. We're talking about money, and I just said that one of the things that got you on the road to bondage was the fact that you allowed your government to stamp a coin that says 20 ounces of silver is worth 1 ounce of gold. And now it's 50 ounces of silver is worth 1 ounce of gold. Now, the way a free government would operate is that if the governmental body, titular or otherwise, creates a coin and it stamps that, that's simply an agreement with that governmental body. It isn't an agreement with the individual. And you can still go out and trade 35 ounces of silver for 1 ounce of gold. And the market sets the price because it's a commodity. But once you have a governmental authority that stamps it and says it's this or that or the other thing, you've got a serious problem, because it's no longer commodity money. It's now a coined money by government authority. Most people don't know it. When they held up that coin of Caesar's, and Jesus said, whose image is on it, he was actually pointing out to the Pharisees that they were using a coin with a graven image on it. Now, Jesus isn't bound by that graven image interpretation, because that's not really what it's all about. But the Pharisees believed we were, but they allowed that coin to circulate in their country. And according to their judgment, their rules, and their interpretation, they shouldn't even have touched that coin ever, but they had to use that coin to pay the taxes. Now, how did that coin come into circulation? Well, the emperor himself coined that money out of his own funds, which were loaned into circulation to build harbors, which made money by collecting fees, and same with roads and marketplaces and some of the Colosseums that they built. They collected fees in the use of those things that they built. They were investment. Romans wanted to make money at everything they did. So how did you pay those fees when you came into the harbor? Well, you could do it with trade goods, but if you got a better deal if you did it with the actual coin of the realm, because they could measure it better. If it was trade goods, they would drive a little harder bargain. And so that made the coin, the stamped coin of Caesar, more valuable, and he got them back because he built the harbor. And when you use the harbor, he got those coins back. So those still were his, loaned out in circulation. This is why Federal Reserve notes, they're just loaning out paper. They're not even loaning out coins. And the truth is, Rome did the same thing eventually. It took all the silver out of the Roman silver coin, and it took it out of the gold coin, and it used circulating paper, and the paper had no value. Now, most of that paper never survived, but some of the iron coins have survived, not very many of them. But it used to cost 200,000 Roman denarii, an iron coin, to buy a modius of wheat, while it only took 6 denarii in silver coin. But anyway, the important thing is that you create a community. Why did communities go to issuing money that was not gold and silver? Why was it important to know that all the gold and silver was in the hands of Egyptian government? The Pharaoh, who became the Egyptian government. He wasn't the Egyptian government. He was just a wealthy man before. Because you have to remember, the Bible clearly states that the Egyptians weren't under his authority. They were free men in Egypt. There were probably many men under his authority, but there were many men who were free. But after the famine, everybody was under his authority, and 20% of their labor, or the value of their labor, whether in coin or actual service, had to go to the government. And that's called the Corvée system of statutory labor. It is tribute. 20% you have to pay in as tribute. And you usually have to pay it because you've been slothful, or because what should have been for your welfare has become a snare, which the Bible talks about in great detail. And of course, that's where everybody is in every country today, because nobody's been listening to the gospel of the kingdom, and they haven't been doing it, and slothful in the ways of Christ. They've said they've accepted Jesus, but they haven't really accepted Jesus. So anyway, one of the things, I promise people to have a little bit of solution in all these talks where I tear everybody down and kick everybody in the rear end, smack everybody across the top of the head for all their foolishness. I also talk about solutions. Well, there are all kinds of coins you could have out there. And if you make any kind of coin that looks like a U.S. coin and stamp with a U.S. deal, that you're going to get yourself into trouble. You don't want to be creating, anything like that. Paper-wise or silver-wise, you don't want to be creating money where the value is somewhere else. You want to have the value in the object itself. Now, it still doesn't give you ownership of the object if you're a citizen of the United States, because you're a capital. You're a member of that system. And therefore, anything that you own, they own a piece of, which is why the kingdom is set up in the way that it is. And I sent something to our local contact ministers and ministers of record that explains a little bit how the government of God works and how it works to set you free. It's actually all contained in the Free Church Report and other documents, but we're honing it constantly so that it becomes clearer and clearer to you. But there's a term, foreign coins. So you could actually have foreign coins. Now, you might want to avoid the name coin, but in all intents and purposes, it would be a foreign coin. It would be something that would be stamped with the signature of its people. And the church really shouldn't be in the coinage business. It should be private individuals being in the coinage business and creating the money of a private society. But that those private individuals who create those coins need to be really private and not public individuals, not members holding an office in a public society, but private individuals. And I know a lot of guys that think they're private individuals, but most of them really aren't. They're just kind of escaping from the system or hiding somewhere from, in the cracks of the system. And in many cases, they're more like parasites because they neither contribute to the system that they're actually still a part of, nor do they contribute to the kingdom. And again, that's the lukewarm that God vomits forth from his mouth. That's the foolish virgins who Jesus will not open up the door for. And it is the unfruitful servant who is cast into prison or has everything taken away from him. And we need to not be that. We need to be the servants of Christ in order to, and in the way, how do we serve Christ? Not by going out and saying, if you accept Jesus in your heart as your personal Savior, you're automatically saved, and then everybody gets really excited and emotional and everything. No, you actually have to be telling people what Jesus was really doing, what he was really talking about, how he was doing it, how the early church was operating, and give the people the opportunity. We have to remember that if we're all ministers, we all have to do the study and the work. And what we tried to do is lay out this material and this information and show you what you're not being shown in all the other churches. And if you go into 1 Peter 2, is it 2:11? I was just looking there. 2:13, it says, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme. Well, which king? Remember, these are the apostles that were saying there is another king. So the question is, who's your king? And it goes back to that original question, is that, a servant of Yahweh, does he still have to pay taxes? Well, it depends. I mean, are you still a servant of the king of the earth, or have you become a servant of Christ? If you become a servant of Christ, you can't own anything. You have to give up everything you own. That's what Jesus said. All your property. He actually uses the word property. Look up vile poverty on our website. In order to be a minister of Christ and come out of the system, you can't own anything in your own name. You have to be a part of an order, a part of a congregation of ministers, and own all things in common. That's what Christ said. And believe it or not, that's what Moses said for the ministers of his government. Now, those ministers are titular. They can't kick in your door and force you to contribute. They can't send you a tax bill and say, hey, you owe me, $10,000, and you have to pay me because that's 10% of what you made. You have to pay me because I'm the government of God. You can't do that. He can't fine you another $1,000 if you don't get it in on time. He can't do that. He's a titular leader. But he's going to provide you the government services. He's going to show you where all the other congregations of record are. And I see Christ doing exactly what Moses was doing. And so I think that's God's plan. I got two witnesses, Moses and Jesus. And the fact is, I believe it's exactly what Abraham was doing. So now I've got Moses and Jesus and Abraham doing the same thing. So that's why I wrote these books, to show you what they were doing. Now, whether you do it or not, that's going to be up to you guys. Dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, obtain the fleshy lust which war against the soul. Boy, we could go into that sentence alone for hours and hours, and that I probably will in the book Pilgrims and Strangers. Having your conversation honest amongst the Gentiles. Have you given an appearance of being a taxpayer at one time? Have you sacrificed on their altars? Did you get prosperity to leave their altars? Conversation, anastrophe, in the manner of life. As your manner of life, have you just opted out of that system, or do they see that you're in another system? That was the argument made by most of the early Christians, made by them, that we have a God we serve. This is how we do it. And we'll talk about exactly what they did in the first century church when their money was failing and there were price controls issued by the government. And I use Justin, who was an apologist who wrote about the early church and between 148 and 155 AD, which is, we're talking early church, that's before the corruption of Constantine started coming in with men like Ambrose and that. And he tells what they did in their church meetings on a regular basis, and basically you can find that in an article, The Mystery of the Eucharist, which is the mystery of Thanksgiving. But basically, they're pointing out that those that had shared with those that didn't have, and he's writing the Emperor of Rome, which was Antonius Pius at that time, who was shortly before Marcus Aurelius, and actually was one of the tutors of Marcus Aurelius. And so what Antonius thought was very important in understanding what Marcus did, and Marcus was the one who persecuted Christians probably officially more than any other emperor, even though he was a great guy. Wonderful guy. But those that had shared with those that didn't have, and he was telling them that because he's saying, this is why we don't participate in your welfare temples. This is why we don't register our children at the Temple of Saturn, which was their Bureau of Vital Statistics, which eventually Marcus Aurelius commanded by statute that everybody in the empire register, whether you wanted to or not, because they needed these people registered in order to collect taxes from them, in order to provide the welfare. Because there were all kinds of people that were dumping their employees out on the streets, and the streets were running rampant with orphans everywhere because marriages were not sticking together, and it had almost been a total cessation of marriage. Everybody was sleeping with everybody else, and people were having 2-3 wives, and not at the same time necessarily because they can't afford them, but they would have one and dump her and have another one and dump her. But this is the kind of things that are going on in America because we have followed the ways of Rome, and so if you want the solution, you need to start forming a society that actually cares about each other. And that's going to mean you need families that care about one another. And there is no divorce amongst you because you work it out. And that's going to take a group of people working it out and sticking together. But as long as society says, oh, yeah, just divorce them, then go over here and divorce them, and then you can collect welfare over here, then where are you going? So what was happening at that time is already, and this was before men like Justin, they were accused of not, just not being taxpayers, not being protesters, being rebels. And so they said, go ahead and submit yourself to these ordinances. It didn't mean that you had to pay taxes to everybody, because if you received the baptism of Jesus Christ, you were cast out of the social welfare of the Pharisees. But Christ created a social welfare system. It was the Corban of Jesus Christ. where 10 families got together and they took care of the needy amongst themselves by free will offerings within that congregation to a minister who had given up everything to be the minister of Jesus Christ. And he received those contributions and cared for the needy in his society. And when a congregation fell on hard times where it could not even do that, it reached out to the rest of the congregations in other areas through a network called the church. And they provided for each other. And when there wasn't enough work in one area, there was people in other areas that, well, come here and we'll give you work. And you can send money back home and help them out. I mean, how often did that happen during the Depression before social welfare? You know, I could name you relatives that I knew that went away to work other places where there was work to make money to send back home so that they could get through. And sometimes buddies went together to do this. And families work together. This is the kingdom. That is kingdom stuff. We don't do that anymore. We don't even run out in the streets when somebody's being raped. Where is well-doing? We don't go to courtrooms when people are being raped in the courtrooms. There are people I know that are being abused by courts right now, and every church in that community should go down to that courthouse and say, what is going on here? Why are you abusing this good man, this good family? Why are you doing that? And I can tell you the judges would shape up, but if you just go to church and think that you're tending to the weightier matters by sitting in a pew listening to a guy puke these false doctrines that aren't even of Jesus Christ, don't tell me you're saved. You're not bearing fruit. Your society should be becoming freer and freer and freer. And it would be. It should be becoming wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. But it is not. It's becoming poorer and poorer and poorer and less free and less free and less free because you aren't being real Christians. Because the Christian community is composed of doers that put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. Because they actually come together seeking the kingdom as much for their neighbor as they are for themselves. Why aren't we on national radio? Why aren't we on radio stations going out to millions and millions of people? Why aren't we getting this message out? It's because people are not actually striving for the kingdom. They're striving for themselves. They are not actually contributing to the message of the gospel. And we have to turn around. As free and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as servants of God. What is more malicious than not spreading the gospel of the kingdom to the whole world? By doing nothing, you commit an act of maliciousness. The world is being raped in the streets as we speak. And we are doing nothing. We are not going on national radio. We are not going on bigger and bigger radio broadcasts to find those souls, to bring them together into congregations of record so that you can actually, through a network of people, help each other out. You should be going to your congregation for your unemployment, for your loans, for your health aid, your food stamps. You should be going to church for those things and living by the perfect law of liberty, but we're not. We got a few guys out there running around saying, I'm free, I don't have to pay taxes anymore. Foolish virgins. 90% of them, foolish virgins. And the door is going to be slammed in their face, and they're going to bang on the door, and Christ isn't even going to open it up. I don't even hear them, guys. God said that. I'm not going to hear them when they cry. It's bad enough you go into the systems of iniquity, but then just come out and do nothing. That's lukewarm. That's neither here nor there. That's puke. Boy, if this isn't a rough message today. But you need to hear this, folks. You need to hear this. You need to turn around. You need to become honorable men. Honor all men. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the king. I don't talk disrespectful of the king. I pity poor Obama. Poor guy's been tempted by the most lawful nation in the world to become a man of power. Saul couldn't even withstand that. He became corrupted by such law. Servants, be subject to your masters. I don't know who your master is. Don't tell me that you just all of a sudden made yourself free. You just pulled yourself up by your bootstraps and made yourself free. I understand your desire to not want to be a part of Egypt. Tell me about your desire to be a part of the kingdom. Why aren't all these people on the network picking men to keep them in contact with each other? Why aren't these men? Why do we have so many women PCMs? I think they're great. Well, where are the men? You men should be leading the way. Every single person on the network should be looking for PCMs, personal contact ministers that will help connect them with more and more people. They should be contributing to the effort of trying to find those people who will actually work as hard for their neighbor's liberty as for themselves. Are we doing that? Are we doing what we should be doing? I noticed that there's the word here, for this is thankworthy. The word there is charis. This is grace. This is favor. And they translated thankworthy in the King James. For this is thankworthy. If a man for conscience toward God endure grief, suffering, wrongfully. That's you when you're abused and you suffer for the conscience towards God. What's the conscience? Because you would not accept the benefits of the world. Because you wanted to provide the benefits for your neighbor. Sacrificing in charity, in grace. We need to do that so that we will put to silence these claims that we're just tax protesters. We're not just tax protesters. If you owe the tax, pay the tax. Read the Free Church Report and find out why a minister doesn't owe the tax. And start being that minister before you stop paying the tax. Start giving up your life so that you may have life more abundant in the everlasting kingdom of God. So I went on a little bit farther than 15. For what glory is it if when ye be buffeted for your faith, ye shall take it patiently? But if when ye do well and suffer for it, ye take it patiently. This is acceptable with God. If you do well, what is doing well? Is it taking care of your neighbors? Why aren't we the Social Security system of the church? Why isn't it that we complain about the churches out there being incorporated? We should be complaining about the churches out there not taking care of the needy of their society. You know, when they talk about Gentiles, whenever you see the word, well, I shouldn't say whenever you see the word Gentile, but when you see the word Gentile in many of these, I was going to go back here and look and see what word they used in here, and I'm not finding it right offhand. But anyway, it usually means, it's from the word ethnos, which means other nation. And when the apostles are talking about the Gentiles, they're talking about other nations. Why? Because Christianity was a nation. Remember, Jesus was the king of a government in Judea. Anyone who became a citizen of the government of Judea through the church that's where they paid their taxes. They had opted out of the system of the Pharisees, and the Pharisees said we had no king but Caesar. So now anyone who was a Christian, they had no king but Jesus Christ. And therefore they could do contrary to the decrees of Caesar, and it wasn't breaking the law. But they said, now when you're in these other nations, don't disrespect their law. But that doesn't mean you have to give them a persona jurisdiction over you. But don't tell me you just simply wiped away that persona jurisdiction because you went out to serve Yahweh if you are not taking care of the needy of your society, if you're not building your society, if you're not gathering together with others who care as much about their neighbor as they do themselves. I mean, I seem like I'm somewhat redundant here, but you see how important this is? You're not the kingdom because you left the world. You're the kingdom because you're doing the will of the Father. So are you doing the will of the Father? There's a question for you.